And Mr. President, I want to comment, as I dramatically shortened my presentation as I was crossing things off of my list that have already been more eloquently expressed by my friend from Kansas. And I think it shows. He brought out a point I think is significant. At the first of the year, we were able to pass the highway bill, which is a major piece of legislation. And it's the first time since 1998 we were able to get a reauthorization bill. And it was because of in the interim period of time, we had the short-term fixes that the senator from Kansas was talking about. And those are expensive, and you can't do major overhauls and improvements and modernization unless you have an authorization bill. And this covers a lot of areas. And I want to repeat one thing that the senator from Kansas stated, and that is in reference to Senators Thune and Nelson. Anytime and I'd say this to all of the members of the Commerce Committee, anytime you get a major piece of legislation like that, it covers a lot of stuff. And there's always a lot of confusion, some opposition, although not as much opposition to this as we had anticipated would be taking place. So there are areas I want to just kind of visit about. I have a special interest in. One is the certification process for general aviation pilots. I know this is mentioned by Senator Moran, but this is something that is very significant, and I want to cover it in perhaps a little bit more detail, along with the other areas and an amendment that we have, which I'm getting a lot of Democrat support on, my amendment amending the use of drones and the allowable use of drones. So first of all, on the Pilot's Bill of Rights too, I just refresh everyone's memory that in the first Pilot's Bill of Rights, this is something that we passed in 2012. It was one that for the first time takes care of a problem that's been out there. The only group of people in America that do not have the opportunity or did not have the opportunity of the protections, the legal protections in our jurisprudence system are general aviation pilots and other pilots, because it allowed the FAA to come in and make all kinds of accusations without giving people the benefit of the evidence that's being used against them. And we passed a good bill. It's called the Pilot's Bill of Rights. Well, last year at Oshkosh. Now, Oshkosh is the largest general aviation event of the year. It's one that involves hundreds of thousands of people and actually thousands of aircraft on the field. I can remember this was the 37th, I say to the presiding officer, the 37th annual convention that I have attended and flown in the last 37 years. And so I'm very familiar with this. And of course, when I get there, they were interested in the successes that were in the Pilot's Bill of Rights. But there's some things that weren't in there that should have been in there. And so we had a session with people. I mean, there are people from all 50 states and countries around the world. And so one of the areas that one that is a concern about has been the medical certification process. It's called a third-class medical. A third-class medical is something that goes into a lot of things that are not necessary and sometimes deter the safety factor that's built into medical certification. And so what we did was we reformed that system. And by the way, I have to say that we've already passed this bill in the Senate. The last thing we did before breaking for Christmas, 10 minutes before we recessed, was to pass a bill, a freestanding bill that does exactly, worded the same way that is in this bill. So this is a backup in case, since that got bogged down in the House for a period of time, we thought we'd put this in here just to make sure that one way or another this does become a reality. And it's singularly the greatest concern for the large organizations called the Experimental Aircraft Association and the aircraft owners, the AOPA. So we put a system in there that provides, first of all, that pilots still will have to do some of the elements of what was considered to be a third-class medical. Now, a third-class medical, 10 years ago, we repealed that or reformed that for pilots of very small aircraft, the light aircraft. And it works. In fact, there hasn't been one injury or death in the last 10 years that can be related to any change that was made in that system. So this just allows the other pilots to have the same benefits that the pilots did in the small aircraft. Pilots still have to complete an online medical education course. Pilots are going to have to maintain verification that they've seen a doctor concerning anything that might impair their ability to safely fly an airplane. The pilots have to complete a comprehensive medical review initially by the FAA. So those safeguards are built in. The Pilot's Bill of Rights, too, increases due process protections established for pilots in the original Pilot's Bill of Rights. You know, in the original Pilot's Bill of Rights, since I've been active in aviation for over 60 years, it was only natural that when problems came up, people would contact me as opposed to their own senators in many cases. And I was concerned and always tried to help people, but until those abuses occurred to me, and I realized all of a sudden I was at risk of losing a pilot certificate, and didn't have the means to defend myself. That's when this whole effort started. Well, this was carried out in the reforms that we intended to put in the first bill that have not really were strong enough to get the FAA to comply with. We have in this bill. One of those is called NOTAMs, Notice to Airmen. NOTAMs, and by the way, I know, and when I talk about this amendment, these are just it doesn't mean a lot to a lot of other people, but there are 590,000 single-issue general aviation pilots in America. It means a lot to. And so these guys are all very much concerned about it, and they all are out there anxious for this to become a reality. A notice to airmen is something that is required and has been required for a long period of time so that people will know if you're going to make a flight from airport A to airport B, if there's any problem on that airport where you're going to land in terms of work on the runway or in terms of lights being out or new towers being erected, something like that. They have NOTAMs. Those are notice to airmen. And so this is going to carry into reality the reform that we intended to do in 2012. So it also ensures that pilots are going to have access to the flight data that, such as air traffic communication tapes and that type of thing. So it's good. And I know it doesn't mean a lot to a lot of other people, but it sure does to 590,000 people. The contract towers, this is a major program. It's kind of interesting. We established a program of contract towers intended to reach areas that didn't really have the unique, normal necessity of information and assistance that you'd have in the normal towers. And the towers do a great job, and I'm talking about now the regular towers, but the contract towers also have done a good job. In 2013, the Obama administration targeted our nation's air traffic control towers as an unnecessary mechanism to make the public feel the pain of non-defense budget cuts. Well, that was back during the sequestration time, and of course, at that time they're going to close all of the contract towers. And they're saying that these towers don't, one of the arguments they use, they don't have the traffic that many other towers have. Well, I suggest to you in my state of Oklahoma, we have a number of great universities and colleges, but two of the two largest are Oklahoma State University and Oklahoma University. They are located in Stillwater, Oklahoma and Norman, Oklahoma. Now, I can tell you right now, if they had been successful in closing down those two contract towers, and on football days, when you have literally hundreds of airplanes coming in, all converging about the same time, it would be a life-threatening event. So we now have been able to maintain those contract towers in a cost-sharing program that's been very successful in the past, and that is in this bill also. Aircraft certification is an issue that some of us are really concerned about. The Oklahoma aerospace industry is a vital and growing component of the state's economy. It's responsible for billions of dollars of economic output of employing thousands of people. The aerospace industry in Oklahoma includes commercial, military, general aviation, manufacturing, the testing, maintenance activities, as well as a vibrant and cutting-edge culture of research and development that is located in my state of Oklahoma. And both of our major universities are an important part of this. And with this in mind, I applaud the bill's inclusion of reforms to the FAA's process for certifying general aviation aircraft and aviation products such as engines and avionics, removing government red tape that is so prevalent that we're all so sensitive to and aware of. The bill also ensures that the FAA maintains strong engagement with industry stakeholders, so the FAA's safety oversight and certification processes includes performance-based objectives and tracks performance-based metrics. And now this is key to eliminating bureaucratic delays and increased accountability between FAA and the aviation community for type certificate resolution or the installation of safety-enhancing technology on small general aviation aircraft. Now, I've got an amendment. When the senator from Kansas was talking about some of the use and restrictions and expansion of the use of the UAVs. We're talking about drones now. Drones sometimes have a bad reputation, and it's normally it's not well founded. But there are some areas where there were restrictions in the use of drones, which I have an amendment that will allow drones to be used in areas where it does make sense. And by the way, this is an amendment. I already have several of my Democrat supporters as co-sponsors. Senator Whitehouse, Senator Heidkamp, Senator Booker are all very enthused about this. And it would direct the FAA to establish rules to allow critical infrastructure owners and operators to use unmanned vehicles, aircraft systems, to carry out federally mandated. If a federally mandated patrol of an area, and that could be in a pipeline or anything else, that are currently being patrolled, some by foot, some by aircraft, and this would allow unmanned aircraft to do that same thing. And it's a safety thing because some of these patrols have to take place in bad weather, and sometimes risk is involved. But if you don't have a person in the airplane, it's an unmanned plane, then this is the ideal use for it. And it does establish a pathway for critical infrastructure operators to use the airspace under the FAA guidelines. There's still FAA under their guidelines, but nonetheless, it is an opportunity to use it. So today, critical infrastructure owners and operators are required to comply with significant requirements to monitor facilities and assets, which can stretch thousands of miles. And this is something that I think that there should not be any opposition to this. We haven't had anyone whom I've asked to be a co-sponsor deny us so far, and I anticipate that we're going to be having a problem. The amendment is supported by a wide array of stakeholders, including the National Rural Electric Co-ops, the American Public Power Association, Edison Electric Institute, the Wireless Association, the American Gas Association, the Interstate Natural Gas Association of America, American Petroleum Institute. I can go on and on. But so far, there's not any either organized or just normal opposition as you normally find. So it's very popular. No one that I know of is against it. That's an amendment I will be offering as soon as we start working at amendments. So that'll make this bill even a better bill. It's one, and again, I applaud all the work that's been done by the members of the Commerce Committee, and particularly by the chairman and the ranking member, Senators Thune and Nelson, for getting down and getting this done. And we're getting into an area where we are really being productive around this body, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. So keep your eyes open on this, and I would encourage any members who have amendments that they want to be included in this to come to the floor with their amendments and do what I'm doing right now so that we can get in the queue, we can get started and get this thing done. I don't know when we're anticipating finishing this bill, but I don't see any reason why we can't do it if everyone gets amendments down by the end of this next week. With that, I yield the floor.